Hey, I'm back. Can't get rid of me. Um, Hope everybody's doing well, having a good summer, getting into the class material, starting to get the gist. Um, I keep the comments coming and keep watching these videos to get my takes and see how they inform yours. See what you think about them. But today I'm going to be talking about the offices, this is plural, from last week. Um, Not a ton of comments, only five, but they were all really good. um, because they got to a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about um, in the first place. And sometimes when I'm in person doing this lecture, it takes students a while to get to what I'm going for. But you guys nailed a bunch of notes that I was gonna make. Um, anyway, so thank you, Charlie, Crystal, Adama, Najima. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, my bad. Um, Correct me, please. And Tiffany, great comments. Um, so let's get to this. The If you didn't know, the British office came first. Okay, and it's really what put Ricky Gervais on the map. And I'm assuming most of you know him from whatever. Um, he hosted the Golden Globes for a few years and was super controversial. He's a pretty influential stand-up comedian. He's done a lot of really good television too, and this was his first sort of foray into the medium. Um, and it just kind of blew up. It really started. A lot of you mentioned the comedy's dry. It's cringe. It's awkward. Yes, that's the point. It was one of, if not the first show to really look at the humor between the lines. In other words, the humor is in how people react to the things that the lines that people are saying, right? The reactions to what people say. It's way less sitcom-y in that there's no setup, punchline sort of rhythm. It's just people interacting, and Curb Your Enthusiasm took from all these popular shows: Arrested Development, Modern Family, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Parks and Rec, all took from the UK office that idea of the humor isn't necessarily in the writing, although it helps. It's in the reactions to and the space between the jokes, if that makes any sense. Um, so you're right. It's it's supposed to be that way, right? Um, and conversely, that's why the American version frustrates me so much because the changes that you guys noted, among others that I'm going to mention, changes that you guys noted, why did they make those changes? And some of you will say, well, it's because it's a different audience. Like American audiences don't like that kind of humor. And that, my friends, is the first problem. Why don't we like it? And it's mostly because, my theory, mostly because our TV panders to us. And being pandered to, there are few feelings less degrading than being pandered to. right? We talked about this a little bit with advertising and how it's you're being pandered to. Advertisers think you're stupid, and they'll throw anything at you with a bright colors and new packaging and slogans and jingles and whatever it takes, and it doesn't take much to get you sort of hooked because you, TV viewer, are an idiot. Like that's when I watch The American Office, especially after watching the British one, that's all I feel. I feel like, oh, these people really think I'm a moron. And it's hard to get out of that once you start thinking of it that way. And some of the things that you guys mentioned, I don't even think you realized you were making the point for me, but you were. Those are the differences that I wanted you guys to see when you watched um, each of those pilot episodes. So I'm going to step way back to basically when television became, a viable medium. Basically, here's a fundamental difference between not just The Offices, but British television, European television, and television in the United States. The British model is it's a community broadcast model, meaning TV for the most part and was created for the community. In other words, it was obviously like news and local goings on and PSAs and all that kind of stuff, but even the artistic stuff, the dramas, the comedies, all that was there to serve the community as entertainment. It wasn't a commercial broadcast system, which ours was. Surprise, surprise. In other words, right, even uh, so much so that I think they do have commercials on British television now, but they didn't until relatively recently in terms of how long people have been watching TV. It was a commercial free enterprise, right? It wasn't like all just public access, but it had more of a community public access, like this is you know, it's a tool of the community or the country or whatever to inform and entertain and do all these things. It wasn't there to make it wasn't there to sell beer or whatever products. That's that is how American television was built. We're like, hey, there's this new thing. It's called television. So they kind of took the theory behind radio. So this is a great way to fucking sell shit, right? We have people's attention. We can make commercials, and that drove all of it, the programming, the ads, the whole thing. So from that point on, the relationship between the entire broadcast systems of each country are inherently different, right? One is to serve the community, so to speak, and one is to basically pilfer the community, so to speak. And that is like the some of the differences that you guys noted and other ones. That's what drives the differences. It's not even cultural. Yes, there are the punchlines, like you have to get over that. Like I can't remember who it was mentioned, Camilla Parker Bowles, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Like obviously culturally speaking, they're going to use names that are relevant to their culture, obviously. But the decisions on how they shoot the show and what they include and all that kind of stuff aren't even based on culture. It's based on almost like economics or something. Um, and that, again, to me, maybe not to you guys, to me, that's just a bummer to sort of go enter into the relationship being like, oh, this show thinks I'm an idiot, and it would continue to do that. Um, so here's another thing that you guys noticed. Charlie mentioned this. UK Office is 2 seasons of like 6 episodes each, and like a 2 hour Christmas special slash finale. That's it. That was the end. So you might be saying like, okay, why is that? So and why, if that's the case, did the American Office, which went 9 seasons, but is literally based on the British version, the first 6 episodes are the first 6 episodes. They use the exact same scripts. If you couldn't tell from the pilot, exact same scripts. Ricky Gervais was an executive producer on the US version. So he was overseeing it all. NBC bought the show from Ricky Gervais. And he agreed to let them have it, let them put it on TV and Americanize it, quote unquote. So, how do you go from 2 seasons in a special to 9 seasons? Well, here's how. The intent of the show was not, for Ricky Gervais, was not to make as much money as possible. And we'll probably talk about this more over the course of the semester, but like, art as commercial enterprise, just it's really difficult to maintain artistic integrity and creativity and things like that when money is involved. So I'm not saying Ricky Gervais didn't make money doing The Office, but it wasn't why he did The Office, in other words. And I think that goes back to commercial enterprise versus community enterprise, right? So if you watch The Office, the UK Office, this Ricky Gervais sold them, the BBC, a story. Here's the story. Here's what happens. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. We all know how stories work, right? This is how much time I need to tell this story. All the episodes, or at least the story arcs and plot lines, were developed fully. And this is the time I need. And then that's what they did. With The Office in the US, and this is virtually every American sitcom, like it started with the British version, then it got into, uncharted waters. And what happens as a result? This is what happens. You get shitty TV, basically, because it wasn't a story that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. It had a beginning, and it had an end when it stopped making money. Like, that's basically the Achilles heel of most American television shows. Is the goal is not to make the best TV show possible. The goal is to make as much money as possible, right? And not to say that those two things are mutually exclusive, but generally speaking, they are, right? So if you picture yourself and you're working on the British Office, you know exactly what's going to happen. You know exactly how you're going to shoot it, how the story's going to go, what the ending is, all that kind of stuff. So you work on the US Office and you get to episode 7 or season 2, episode 1, and all of a sudden every week you're asking yourself, okay, what do we do now? Now what? You're in that writer's room. Like, hey, we need an episode. What's going to happen? Oh, let's put Michael in a straitjacket. That'll be funny. Why? Why is that funny? Let's invent ridiculous, more and more ridiculous things for Dwight to do that nobody would ever do. How about that? Yeah, people love Dwight. Let's keep doing that, right? So, um, I think it was Tiffany was saying she liked the characters better from the British version. Yes, totally agree because they aren't caricatures of themselves. They feel like real people. That's what happens when you have this commercial broadcast system that puts money first. So how do you get money? You get viewers. How do you get viewers? You have to speed everything up. These are all things that you guys mentioned. You got to speed everything up. You got to make it bright. You got to make it loud. There's got to be action. There's got to be romance, right? Look at how they develop the relationship between Dawn and Tim in the British one and Jim and Pam in the American one. If you watch the whole British Office, it's their relationship. Like I cried at the end, like because I was so invested in it, and it wasn't so just in your face, and they let it sort of develop naturally, and it was like heartwarming. Jim and Pam immediately in the Jim and Pam in the American Office, Jim and Pam are immediately connected with the stupid scene about the Yo play. Oh, did he say my favorite was mixed berry? They added scenes to be like this is, and again, this is why. Hey, this is America. We're gonna need some romance. We're gonna need to speed that up, right? We're gonna need to make Michael a complete idiot, but more likable, right? Someone mentioned was Charlie mentioned Michael and David. Everybody mentioned Michael and David. Um, you're not supposed to like David Brent. Like you're all like, oh, I didn't like David Brent. Like exactly, you're not supposed to. He's a piece of shit. He's completely delusional and self absorbed. He's like bad at his job. He's self centered. Like you're not supposed to like him. So the fact that people like Michael Scott is just a testament to basically kind of how we have in the United States typically have been conditioned to be like that's what we want. We want to like this guy. And if you watch the British Office, David Brent gets fired because of course he does. Does Michael get fired? Michael does a million worse things because they have to keep coming up with worse and worse, crazier and crazier things to keep people invested. It ceases to become a story, right? They tried at the end to like when the Pam starts falling for the boom mic operator and they start breaking the fourth wall and all this. They tried as a last ditch effort to sort of connect it to something real. That's another thing that people don't really get, and it's hard to explain. I'll try though. The the British Office, like part of Ricky Gervais or David Brent's sort of delusion is that he thinks when you're watching the show, he thinks he's he's becoming a star because he's on TV. So like in the world of the British Office, people are watching what we're watching in real time. So they're watching episodes of The Office while it's going on, which is this whole little story within a story. The American one, it, by season 2, you're like, why are these people talking? Who are they talking to? Why are they talking to these cameras and doing these side interviews? Like, what is the point of it? And then at the end, they're like, oh, it's going to be on TV. Like, it's a total cop out. So there's the commercial versus community thing is the big thing. And it, like I said, it informs all of those decisions, of all those differences that we sort of we want to say are cultural. Like, they're not really, unless you look at economics as culture, and maybe that is true. Um, I just think it's super disingenuous when you really think about it. And this is not to say a lot of people accuse me of, oh, he hates The Office, he hates Friends. I'm like, I don't hate them. I just think I'm just disappointed, I guess. Like, it's okay to hate things that you love, right? I mean, you're supposed to be critical of the things you love. Like, that's how the world works, basically. I'm critical of, like, the three things I'm most critical of are my children and sitcoms and pizza. Like, don't bring that weak shit, is basically what I have to say to those three things. Like, you demand it of. Like, I've had this conversation with many students. You know, if you're complaining about the government or Biden or Trump or whoever, someone someone says, "Hey, you know, we're this is the land of the free. If you don't like it, like, get out." Like, no, that's stupid. I want the country to be the best it can be, and if it's fucking up, I'm gonna say it. If I disagree with it, I'm gonna say it. Doesn't mean I hate it. It's just bad logic. Um, so these these the characters are a perfect example. Um, Tiffany mentioned how the American characters are more. The set is just brighter, right? And the characters are more animated. Or exaggerated was her word, and I'm glad he used exaggerated because it's take Kevin Malone, okay? Kevin isn't supposed to be a main character. He's supposed to be just in the background, right? And they if you watch his character over the 9 seasons, in the first few seasons, that's pretty much what he is. He's just kind of a background character. Then all of a sudden, like, he gradually turns into this just like fat, like, mentally disabled character. Like, he can't even utter a sentence. Like, he's so dumb. Like, it's just not even real. It's so much so that they have an actual storyline where Holly thinks he's disabled mentally. If you've watched the show, you know what episode I'm talking about. He She thinks he's legitimately disabled. Think about Dwight. Just like it looked like the writers' room would sit down and be like, okay, they love this Dwight character. Let's make him right. Let's give him something crazy to do. Recyclops. Let's give him right. Let's have him do something even more and more and more over the top. And like that, Dwight became a caricature of Gareth, which is the original character from the British one. They all did. And then they added some, right? Meredith. Why? We need a drunk lush. Oh, how about this older woman? That'll be funny. Not really. I mean, they added so many characters, and it's just like each one that they added and gave more sort of material to is just another signal that we're out of ideas, right? This story should have ended, you know, 6 years ago. That's most sitcoms in the United States. Um, Anything after 3 seasons is usually trash. Uh, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, that's the case. Um, so Charlie, you mentioned the drier, somber humor. Pretty much everybody used different adjectives. Crystal mentioned bland, melancholic, um, Adama, slow paced, dry, Nagima or Najima, again, help me out with that. Awkward, cringe, like, yes, it's supposed to be. You're supposed to cringe at David Brent. You're supposed to cringe at Michael Scott. You're not supposed to like him. You're just, you're not. And it's unfortunate that everybody fucking loves him. And Tiffany used dry and awkward. Yeah, that means it was successful. That's what the American version is supposed to be like, right? If they had the balls to be like, I think America can get it. Like, they're not complete idiots. Here's another example, joke wise. They both use the Bud Light "what's up" joke. Both use it, right? And they use it differently. It's very subtle, but it's different. So British version, um, David Brent comes out, and he says it to Gareth and Tim, and they respond back with sort of, Gareth's all into it, and Tim's like, yeah, nice, hilarious, whatever. Um, that what do you get from that scene? You get the point that David Brent is using this old joke that's tired, but he thinks it's still hilarious. Like, you get that. You get David Brent is lame. Like, that's supposed to be, he wants to be cool with his employees, but he's lame. That's the takeaway. So they do the same joke in the American one. Michael comes out of his office. He says to Dwight and Jim, "What's up?" And Dwight's all into it. Jim does the Jim thing, and he kind of rolls his eyes, and he's like, "What's up?" No, I don't even think he said "What's up." What did Jim say? Jim said, "Oh, it's still funny after 7 years." Now that is pandering. That is saying to you, you won't get this joke unless we give Jim a line to tell you that you're supposed to get the joke you're supposed to get. That shit drives me crazy. Drives me crazy. They did it right in the first episode. They're like, this is too smart for this stupid American audience. This joke. It's not. It's not at all. But that that's the tone that I get um, from stuff like that. Um, yeah, the focus is on storytelling rather than making money. Because once you get into syndication in the United States, that's where all the money is. When NBC sells the show to TBS or to Netflix or to whatever it is, all those actors get all this money, and the show lives on forever. That's where all the huge money is. Syndication. And used to be you needed 100 episodes to get syndication. So you could picture you get a TV show, they greenlight it, you shoot the first episode, you're like, okay. Like now it's not like what's the best story. It's this sort of death march to 100 episodes. How can we get 100 episodes? Well, you just got to keep making up more shit. Um, oh, Adama mentioned the theme songs. That's another great point counterpoint with the two shows. The American version, very upbeat. Everybody knows the Office jingle, right? Everyone knows the theme song with the piano or whatever it is. And the British one is very somber. It's overcast day. It's just shooting like this gray, dark, just sort of, ugh, you know. It creates this tone. second part of that is in the British version, no characters, doesn't show each character's face, doesn't, it might say their names. I don't even think it says their names. The British one is, hey, Steve Carell, who, right? Jim Krasinski, John Krasinski, what's her name? Jenna Fisher, right? Everybody's, because why? Because the American version is money based. So we need to create stars and we need to create names. So we attach the names to the characters and we attach the characters to the actor and we create stars that way, right? Again, it's not about the story, basically. It's about this guy and this guy and this guy. Oh, it's got Steve Carell, right? So they're much more interested in making stars out of people. So the theme songs is a good one. The differences between them, and Nagima again. The U.S. version felt like a sitcom. Like that's such a perfect synopsis of this whole thing. That the British version was like watching a real Office, and the American one was like watching a sitcom. Like that, yes, you're right. You said that like it was a bad thing, I thought, though. I got this little, like, oh, I don't like it because of that. And you're almost powerless against it, to stop it. Because we've been conditioned, like, this is what a TV show looks like, right? So I'm saying that the by making the British one real, it's way closer to um, what it's supposed to be than the American version. If that makes any sense, it probably doesn't. But there's so many things involved in this, and again, I I prefer the British. I've watched the American many times over. Um, because of course there's funny stuff in there, um, but it just it I think it's interesting that to trace those things back to literally like the origins of TV in each culture and connect them to these differences that we still are feeling today. Um, so that's just some more TV stuff to think about for you. Um, keep the comments coming. Keep watching, and you'll see me. You'll see me again.